Hi everybody, welcome back. This is Instructor Phil Demetriadis. We are going to finish our lecture on two-point perspective. We talked our last lecture for environment design and environment sketching. We covered the one-point basics. I want to cover and show you some examples of when and why we use 2 points. This is an introduction to environment design, and there are given times when we want to switch between 1 point, 2 point, and 3 point. We're not going to get into 3 point yet. That's going to be another assignment that we're going to do after this assignment, okay? So, 2 point perspective. And when you go look at animated films, you go look at movies, you go look at storyboarding for movies, okay? Even if you look at a lot of game design, something that's happened over the past, I'm going to say about 7 years, is even game designers have become aware that part of their responsibilities is to also tell stories, so they need to hire environment designers, they need to hire board artists, layout artists, storyboard designers, and workbook artists. Anyone know what a workbook artist is? A workbook artist is an individual who is they're like a glorified storyboard artist, but also layout designer. And what they would do in animation is they would do more detailed workbooks on what was happening in the storyboards, but they would have indication of light. They would have light arrows explaining exactly what was going to take place in terms of all lighting. They would have arrows indicating the path of the character. And then they would even have the camera management taken care of. What I mean by that, imagine if the camera was going to start from pose A and then do a truck into a character, and there was an animation path, you would indicate all that inside a workbook. Okay, there are some companies and places that still do that. The reason why I know some of this information is a good friend of mine was recruited by Blizzard to go over there to basically work on what they call an animatic/cinematic team. Okay, their goal is to become better storytellers and be able to get the viewer, who is you, the game buyer, to look at their little cinematics and to walk away like, wow, that's an awesome game. I want to buy that game, right? So there's a there's a really important vested interest in wanting to obtain people that have that understanding of how perspective works and how to transfer that knowledge into environments and how to draw correctly. What you're doing is a level of perspective to environment sketching. What comes after this is when you learn tone, you learn composing, you learn color. Then you start getting into more complicated work where you're basically becoming a storyteller, and you're getting into narration where you're narrating and giving the emotional impact of a particular story. All right, 2 point perspective, what it is used for, and we will look at samples. 2 point perspective is used for transitions. Anytime you have a transition. So what is a transition? If we have a character who might be growing from a young man into an old man, maybe you have a character who is transforming from his younger self to an older self. Maybe you have somebody who's going through some type of growth or movement. Maybe they're moving from one part of the country to another part of the country. Okay, swipes. You know what a swipe is? When we look up at the screen and you see a little swipe, it's a cut move. Whenever you see those cut moves, you tend to see them in a 2 point perspective shot. Okay, linear and organic movement. What does that mean exactly? Linear and organic movement. If I have a row of battleships that's about to take off, I might show that row of battleships in 1 point from the very beginning because that expresses the power and importance of the shot. Then I immediately cut to a 2 point perspective shot to show the length of all of these ships then engaging and about to take off. So if you watch movies like, did you guys see that recent Battleship movie that was done? It was actually pretty good. Is it what? Battleship, the recent movie that was out with
Are you talking about literal Battleship movie or like a war film?
No, there was a movie that recently came out. It was about, I'm trying to remember the exact title. I think it was Battleship, right? Where they had, there are a couple famous actors in it. It was over Hawaii and the aliens were attacking and they're in the water. You know what I'm talking about? That's a great example. If you look through parts of that movie, you will see segments where we're seeing the battleships coming to engage the enemy and they're cutting into 2 point perspective shots because they're showing a row of them coming by. Another great example of that might be Apocalypse Now. When you see the helicopters coming in, the first opening shot of those helicopters, they show them coming in, playing some famous classical music, right? And they come in at 1-point perspective and they immediately cut and they show a huge amount of choppers coming in 2-point perspective. There are a couple World War II movies that have bombing sequences when they show the jets coming in to bomb, or excuse me, the airplanes and the bombers coming in to bomb part of World War II. You know, in parts in France and Europe, we see them in 1 point for a second, immediate cut, and then we transition and we see them into 2-point perspective, okay? So anytime we have linear, meaning a pathway, we have a path of movement going from point A to point B, or organic movement. Organic movement can mean like trees. So if we have a series of tree branches and other elements that are organically moving through a scene and taking us from point A to point B, that is that linear movement, okay? Along with that, the cousin to that is scale and transition. So anytime you want to show an environment or a world to somebody and you want to show them what it looks like, something really close up in front of you, and then how it reduces down in scale and what it looks like really far away, that's a perfect example of where you're going to see scale and transition, okay? Obviously, more interesting angles by switching into 2-point perspective. We talked about this in Phil's applied perspective class, right, which is off for next semester. Okay. One of the things we talk about is in 2-point perspective, if we pull one of the vanishing points closer to the frame and have the other point to the far extreme, way, way, way off the page, we create a little bit of a perspective anomaly where we're seeing a little bit of distortion because of the cone of vision. But then we have the ability to go from like the left side all the way down to the right side because of that little perspective anomaly, okay? So we were able to generate more interesting angles for storytelling. Off-kilter 1-point perspective. What does that mean exactly? Well, if you take it, a lot of artists will take an image of an environment. I'm holding my hands up in a square right now, and they sort of turn the frame a little bit, right? That's known as a Dutch tilt. Well, sometimes when they're doing that, they're taking perspective and they're off kiltering their 1 point, but they're actually turning it into a 2-point drawing now, because now you've introduced, once you turn something a little bit, you're introducing a secondary vanishing point to it, okay? Controversy. Anytime you have characters inside an environment that are going to fight, that don't like each other, or something bad is going to happen, 2-point perspective, especially over the shoulder shots, is extremely important, okay? Without a doubt. I'm going to show you guys samples in just a minute here, okay? Any type of controversy. The other thing that's really great about 2-point perspective is balance. If you go into the world of composition and you start thinking about composing, okay, one of the most important parts of composition is balance, okay? Well, there's harmony and unity and all those other things, but balance is one of the key things, because if you think about it with balance, everything in life exists around balance. I'll give you an example. I've been getting up every morning and I've been drawing and sketching. I like listening to Moby. I love Moby. Well, guess what? There hits a certain point in time where I can't listen to Moby and I can't listen to, trying to think of a couple other bands that have more sort of mellow music that I listen to. Sometimes I listen to Enya, okay, because it's really relaxing. And there's a certain point where I can't take any more of that and I have to go listen to Metallica. I need something on the other side of the spectrum. And then the same thing happens where if I'm listening to Ozzy and I'm listening to somebody else, there hits a certain point where, okay, I can't listen to, any, social distortion anymore. I can't listen to, old school punk or anything like that. I have to go back to the other end of the spectrum. All of life is based on balances, okay? So I'm going to make this little comment here. Problems with the technical usage, if not used correctly, will result in distorted cone of vision, okay? So if you're doing a drawing and you don't know what you're doing with perspective and you place your camera frame in the wrong place and one vanishing point or both vanishing points are too close to your frame, like I mentioned in last class, you will have a distorted composition, which basically means your subject matter is too large inside your grid plane, okay? All right, so that's what causes that distorted cone of vision. The other thing, extreme transition of scale, okay? Symmetrical placement of center mass shape. We talked about that in the example I showed you last class. If your subject matter is too big, you end up with that line down the middle of the page because you have a limited cone of vision when your vanishing points are too close, okay? Lack of understanding of scale and height. Most common problem I have with students is they're drawing in 2-point perspective. They make a house or a door or a window frame one size over here to the left. They go to the right side and they don't bother to follow the adjustment of scale. and that's the height of the buildings or the light poles or the trees, whatever it is, being transferred and scaled down the composition, and then they just draw something from their mind down there and they throw the scale off, which means the environment drawing is off, okay? All right, so those are the basics, right? So let's take a step forward here. All right, so let's start looking at some examples, okay? Transitional pan, more interesting shots. This is development art from Ratatouille. Okay, this is where you're going to start to see some really great examples. You know, part of that story of Ratatouille is being involved inside France. And France is huge. It's big. It's beautiful. Even part of the story inside the movie is about running around, going through different places, right? So that's an important part of that visual scripting when they start to create visual development artwork. They need to think about the importance of transitional pans and how do you communicate that to the viewer. Now, nobody's ever sitting there going, well, you know, Jerk, I think you should draw that in a transitional pan and 2-point perspective. That's not how people talk. That's where part of your education needs to come in. People that work at Pixar or DreamWorks are in the upper tier of creating and design. They understand the difference between 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point and Dutch tilts. They know what a cone of vision is. They know how to prepare these things, because when professionals sit down, they think about what the emotional impact is that they're trying to give, and then they find the ways to get there. Does that make sense? And we do that through the process of elimination. All right? Okay. So as we go through, another beautiful shot. This is 2-point perspective. Some people might think it's one. It's not. For example, if you look at this building, you have that building receding back this way. You have this building receding that way. You look at this building here. It's going downward that way. This side is receding back there. Now, it's a little bit, there are multiple perspectives in there, because those buildings are being designed around what, folks? A round sort of lagoon, which if you've ever been to parts of Europe, in the Mediterranean, that's really common. As you see, you have the round outside line and perimeter line of cities and villages, and the villages wrap around there. So that means you're going to have some buildings like this building over here. That vanishing point is now over here, because these buildings from here over are all going around a circle, so the vanishing point is changing. So that's like we talked about when you have the interior of a library. You can have the interior and have books in 2-point perspective and turned at other angles. They're all just have different vanishing points on the same horizon line, right? That's the only difference. So, and then looking at this, where is the horizon line? I had a student once say, it's right here, bro. It's right there. It's not right there. Okay? Look, if you look at this, we can see on top of these roofs. And if you look at this line is almost horizontal to that line. The horizon line on this piece is right about there. And once you go above that line, the buildings are angling downward. Okay? All right. So let's continue forward. Another fantastic shot. Talk about directional movement, and we talk about balance. Okay? Look at the balance between the characters being on the left-hand side of the screen, and then what is the balancing aspect that I mentioned? It's the Eiffel Tower there, exactly. See how they balance each other? Now, the Eiffel Tower is taller and larger shape, but lacks in color. And if you look at the characters, they have more color and they have more warmth to them, and they are a cool and warm combination next to each other, versus the Eiffel Tower is a little bit more subdued, a lot skinnier, right? Good sense of balance. Also, notice the transition. Okay, when I first started as a student, left and started taking some classes back in the day at the good old Associates in Art. This is pre all the current. Someone told me there's a new school called Brainstorm, and then there's Concept Design Academy, and there's all these different places, right? Back in the day, we had Associates in Art. That was it. And I remember going there, and one of the instructors I had talked about the importance of 2-point always being used to move you through a scene. And that's exactly what this is doing here. You have a direct foreground element, and it pitches and moves us right in towards the back area. Okay? Here's another great example. A lot of times, this used to, my friend Robert St. Pierre worked on part of this show right here. He moved to Australia, Disney, and worked on it back in the day. It was a second version for this, and this was actually one of their layout tests, is you had to draw the environment, and then you had to draw the scale of the vehicle, and you had to show the vehicle proceeding down its animation path, going all the way down to the far right, past the overlay of the horse and carriage right there. Okay? So, but again, do you see that transition, how we're going from left to right? Or sometimes in other drawings, you'll see it going from right to left. Okay? We mentioned travel. Whenever you see people traveling, going from point A to point B. I mentioned that earlier. You're going to see that. So you guys know what that's from? I hope so. Best show ever, right? So if you watch Game of Thrones and you see these little sequences where they're up in the air and they're looking down, they're going to tend to be in 2-point shots. Unless it's what? Unless they're looking at a particular city, in the front end of the city, then the city might be in a dedicated 1-point shot. Like whenever you would see the main palace of where the, what are their names? Drawing a blank right now because I'm too busy talking. The Lannisters live, you tend to see that in like a 1-point shot looking right at it to encourage the power, right? But again, anytime you have travel, transition, point A to point B, or taking the viewer from somewhere, okay, you're going to have a dedicated shot in 2-point. Controversy. Have you guys seen this movie, Fury? Okay, with the tanks? All right. This was a really important part where he's trying to take this American soldier. He's trying to get him to basically kill the German enemy and learn what war is really. He's trying to get him out of his comfort zone and make him kill somebody, right? There's a tremendous amount of controversy happening. I don't know if you've seen it, but that scene was pretty crazy because he's like pushing him and then finally he won't do it and then Brad Pitt just does it. You know what I mean? And takes the guy out, right? So that's a great example here. Do you see the lineup happening in 2-point? So anytime you see lots of controversy, lots of fighting, something important's going on, you're going to see that, okay? All right? We talked about travel, linear transitions by scale. This is art by Nicolas Bouvier, right? Look at Sparf. Excellent designer, amazing artist. Look at how that ship is banked at an angle like that, okay? He has an ability to move you in 2-point this way, back to here, back to there, back again, and back. And if I haven't done this yet, but I have I'm writing a composition class this summer to focus on composition for conceptual and visual development of the entertainment arts, right? Looking at composing. That is what I call a switchback pattern, okay? It's great. You take the viewer's eye and you move them through the whole composition. He brings you from here, from that guy right there, by highlighting him like that and putting a couple cools against warms. He keeps your eye right here, and then he takes you and zigzags you and pushes you all the way back there. Okay? Really important stuff. All right? I found this piece on travel. Great piece. Now, this could be argued that that is in 1-point perspective, which is really close to. However, the fact that the side of the ship is receding to a point here, and then this isn't more of an angle going down this way, is telling me that that is the introduction of a secondary vanishing point slightly off the page, okay? And that, by the way, I love that. Great example of coming to or from, fantastic. Beautiful piece of work, okay? I was looking at some artwork from JamieJones, okay? Another really super duper talented guy, all right? In a lot of pieces, you're gonna see characters sketched off. So if you look at this, now this might, again, look like it's sort of in 1-point, but if you look, it's very close to 1-point, but it looks like you have some lines, especially when looking at the feet that are receding back this way. So what does that mean? Remember I mentioned that earlier about the cone of vision, about pushing and drawing on the edge of that cone of vision of a vanishing point, and the second vanishing point is way off on the other page. That's what this example is that if you do it right, you can create some really interesting really interesting shots by staging right on that little edge right there. Okay? All right? That was some, does anyone know what movie that's from? That's from World War Z. That's artwork by artist Dylan Cole. And that was a part where the zombie guys invade part of the airport and start running on the field. Okay, when they were trying to take off on their plane. Actually, another freaky movie. It was really good too, right? So, look at that scene. Look at that shot. Everything in there is dedicated into 2-point. Okay? Why? They're trying to show the movement of the zombies from the very front and show them doing what? Coming in all the way to the back of the airport, right? Without a doubt. That's how I would set up that shot too. Okay? This also is a great example of artists that, on a side note, that are developing conceptual-based art for movies, which you can also term as production design, that are using painting techniques also with blended photos. Okay, there is a dedicated position for this, where in order for a movie to get sort of pitched and to go forward, you have to create a series of production design stills on what the movie looks like, and they prefer having photo blends inside those pieces. So that car looks like a photo blend where then they banged it up a little bit. That plane looks like it was taken from something put on there. And then by using Photoshop and overlapping things, as long as you can get in, that's a viable option. If you know how to paint and draw, and then you could sit around and come up with like 6 realistic panels of what the film would look like, the executives love to see that. They want to be able to see your ability to conceptualize, and they want to know what their film looks like as if it was a piece of the film. That right there looks like a piece of the film, even though some of these people are probably people from Target ads or people, friends that he's taking pictures of that might be going down the street, superimpose and blend it all together. This looks like it was painted back here. That looks like a realistic fence. That's a real car. And he sort of blended all together by painting over it. Okay? All right, some more awesome Sparf. Okay? Travel. Remember, I talked about ships taking off, ships leaving, people getting ready to take off on a destination. I was just watching, God, my brain's on empty because I haven't had lunch yet. I was just watching that movie where the guy gets stranded in space and then he wakes up the girl out of the pod. What's the stupid Passengers? Is it? Yeah. I was just watching part of Passengers, and I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm all, and they show like the ship, and I'm like, travel 2-point shot, just saying to myself, watching all the shots, because they're showing this huge ship transitioning in space. Even in space, you still see the ship the majority of the times in 2-point perspective as well. Okay? All right. Some more great art. Some more conceptual based art. That's Seth Ingstrom. Okay. So we have a train traveling, going across, dedicated 2-point. Okay. Feng Zhu's an amazing artist. Looking at his work is just awe-inspiring. The way this guy roughs, the way he draws. He has a great sense of contrast and light that comes out. Okay. Really fantastic. Look at the scale transitions. Look at the people here on the far left, and look at the people way down here. You can do that in 1-point, but it's a little easier in 2-point to do it because you can zigzag again. You can move scale and height of buildings and individuals back and forth and across because you have more of an open area. You're not limited by the cone of vision. Okay. Another example. So we talk about directional movement and scale. Look at the size of that ship and look at the smallness of the people walking onto there. Okay. All right. TomHenry, who is head of the Entertainment Arts Program over at Art Center, another super talented, amazing artist, right? Look at this beautiful building here in the foreground, pushes us right back in here, cool against warm. Know exactly where you're supposed to visually, what you're supposed to be looking at. Okay. Some of these buildings, what's funny is that that's in 2-point. Some of these are turned, you see them? I like the clouds in there so you know there's other houses down there. So he has the ability to like give you the feel that you're up high, but then looking down below you, there's other houses way far, down there. Obviously, if you're standing here and fell, you would die if you fell over, right? Because look at how low these other structures are. And then look, we talked about zigzag, right? Here to here to there to there to there, and you sort of zigzag back inside the composition, right? Okay. You guys know who Craig Mullins is? If you don't, you got to look him up. His website is goodbrush.com. He is probably the most experienced, one of the most developed and well-respected painters in the industry. He went to Art Center way back in the heyday when it only had like a transportation program. And he was one of the first artists that got involved with the digital paint process when Photoshop wasn't really a full-fledged program, and when there were little software programs like Pixel Paint and other little things. He was one of the guys that first got involved with that. He is an amazing painter and artist, and he takes all of his, here's a great example. You have to have the ability to take your traditional understanding of traditional mediums, Ryan, and apply that to using and creating your digital artwork. It will help you drastically, and here's a fantastic example. Also, notice the transition and the composition. Ready? Here we go. We're right here. We go to here. We zigzag back into here. We sort of jump back up in here, and then you follow these little roads, and then you end up at that castle. See how it works? Okay, another great example of taking us from transition. 1, 2, 3, and then boom, boom, and you're up there on the top, right? Beautiful composing right there. And I love waterfalls, right? Okay. Discovery. Talked about discovery. Directional movement. You know this character is going this way or on a path to get out of there, right? He's got a backpack. He's got a light. Everything's turned at an angle. He's traveling. That's the indication of directional movement through any location. Another ex-Disney member, Rob Ruppel, who's now head, it's like one of the head art directors over at Naughty Dog in Santa Monica. Okay? Another extremely talented guy who has some beautiful books you should pick up. They're really great stuff. Okay? Some older drawings from Seth Ingstrom when he was a layout artist in development at DreamWorks. Okay? Before he got into digital painting. He was skilled at drawing. And he could draw all his environments, and the medium of choice back in part of this era was Prismacolor pencil on tracing paper or graphic pad paper. Okay? All right? Love this shot from JamieJones. Another beautiful informational sketch here. Okay? Look at the transition going right here in the foreground, and see how these go from here to here, back to here, and then we see these guys. What are they doing right there? Are they having lunch? No. They're pointing in a direction that they're going to be traveling and going towards. Okay? All right? Some more discovery, more TomHenry. All right? That guy looks like he's fleeing from that guy. Do you see it? What does that guy look like he's doing on that ship? He's like, I'm getting the hell out of here. I just came around this corner and found this dude. Right there, right? Okay? I don't know the exact background of it, but another beautiful piece from TomHenry. So, what are we talking about here? The last 4 slides. Discovery. Something new. Walking through and opening up a pair of bushes and looking in and seeing this big, beautiful world in front of you that you haven't seen. I'm not sure if I put the slide in here or not, but another great slide example of discovery is an Avatar. When you're like up on that tree branch and you're looking through all the jungle and you see all the, everything down below in the whole jungle. It's another great discovery shot. Okay? More discovery. Okay? Now this is a little bit of a cheat here. That's a 3-point perspective shot. Okay? But I put it up anyway. Because you have a horizon line up here. So you see this little square here. That's receding to a vanishing point. The side of that's going to another vanishing point. And then the depth from here going downward, those lines, that's going to the third point. So this, that, and part of that is all going back down to a third vanishing point about right there. Okay? All right. Some more beautiful artwork from JamieJones. Look at the scale. Remember, showing instant transition as a scale works better in 2-point. You have more room to do it. You can create more interesting angles. All right. There's some Sparf is really amazing. I mean, he really has some wonderful display. Has a really solid understanding of the transformation of scale. Knows exactly what to do. He shows you, you look at this, you see this guy in the foreground, and you realize, like, wow, that dude back here is like a dot. See that? He gets your eye to move through, and he gets you to have an understanding of what's actually taking place in terms of that overall depth change inside the piece. It's beautiful. Okay? Love this piece. This was where I was talking earlier to a couple students about some of the digital illustration classes I'm writing this semester to expand beyond the digital painting classes, right? This is about composing and storytelling right here, right? What do those two guys look like they're going to do? Do they look like they're going over there to play Uno together? No. Do they look like they're going to talk to these guys? Maybe a little bit of talking, but their shields are up in the air. Look at his body gesture holding that sword. Look at the head turning to the right as the body is arcing the other way. That's what bodies do when they're about to attack people. Okay? If you ever get in an altercation with somebody who's standing here in your face, who's talking a lot of crap, you know they're not going to do anything because they're like this in your face, squared off, going, hey, bro, it really bothers me the way you drive and you stole my spot. And they're talking at you like this, straight on. when is it time to worry? Is it once the person does this and they arch back? Then it's time to worry, because now they've turned their body where they've put their weight on a back foot, which allows them to throw a haymaker. Okay? So when the body turns into 2-point, everything changes. Their bodies are turned into 2-point perspective right there. If I had to go in here and if I had to draw a box around them, you could see the box formation, and that box, look at how this guy is turned. His weight is on his right front leg. Why? Because his hand is on his sword, and if he continues to step forward with that leg and run, that arm will be raising and it'll be coming down as he transitions his weight to his left leg. Okay? That's the importance of figure drawing. It's the importance of looking at the body and the movement. How do you pose? Because an artist that doesn't know what they're doing would pose the characters like this, all standing like in 1-point perspective looking at the other guys. Wouldn't have the same feel. That is professional level composing and storytelling right there. Especially the guy in the front. He's like, I look at him and just the words I get off of this is, do those guys want some? You know what I mean? That's what it makes. Those guys are ready to go over there and battle with those guys, right? Beautiful piece. And the color, everything about it's wonderful. Okay? More Sparf. Okay? Overlap, scale, large in the front, small in the back. Indicates transition, indicates depth, scale and size. Okay? One of the most important things you learn in a dedicated perspective class is how to use the transformation of scale and how to draw it correctly and apply it inside your scenes. All right? Another scale piece. Don't know whose that one was. I think that might have been TomHenry. It's a futuristic, like, Chinese wall. Do you see it? The wall going over the mountains. But it has these, like, little substations there. It's really great because whoever did this could have painted this, and there's, like, these ships landing. You see that? But it almost looks like a structure. So you see the ship here. Well, all you had to do was paint this one, copy and paste it, bring it over here, and then paint on top of it and make it a little different. And that, was able to facilitate part of your design process. Okay? More JamieJones. Talk about scale. Look at how you look into here, and then look at the size of that thing with those tentacles. Yeah. This building has 50 floors. That thing has 1,000 floors, right? Look at how tall it is. All that thing has to do is move a tentacle and it wipes out like 10 city blocks, right? Look at the power in that piece. Okay, beautiful. All right? Some more Sparf. Overlap. Take a look at Sparf. I highly recommend you go out and buy his books. I have all of his books. Absolutely love them. If you go look on Gumroad, he has a couple demos that he does. Talks about how he works. He has his brushes, some stuff like that for sale. Absolutely, totally worth it. He is one of the things that I really like about him is not only the way that he composes and his scale transitions, but he's a master of understanding foreground, midground, and background, which is, again, how to overlap and tell stories. And he's a master of grouping. He knows how to play variation of shape. All those things come together that set him out. You know what's funny is that there are people out there that are really good at, like, rendering, and they might be really good at drawing, but then they have no understanding of how to compose. And I've seen it the other way. I've seen some people that can compose really well, but they can't paint in a gradient format, or they can't blend their colors together. So you have this huge spectrum when you get up to that professional level. Being able to do all of them together is sort of a rarity that brings you together. It's like being a kung fu master where you're good at close fighting, but you suck at swords. You know what I mean? It's like you have to know, like, I'm good at personal combat, but I can't defend myself against a stick, So, artists need to have that well-rounded education in there, right? Look at this. Look at the scale. Do you guys even know? Look at the height of the buildings. So look at the big buildings and look at the lights of the little buildings. And then you even see the two little people standing right there. Isn't that awesome? Pure awesomeness right there. Okay? Another scale piece. Okay, again, this is transferring back this way, and then this side is going back. See that line coming back that way? It's in 2-point. Something I mentioned in composing and in design, the power of primes, prime numbers. 1, 3s, 5s, 7s, and 9s. Okay? Something about it makes sense. Even in, if you ever notice when somebody dies, tend to be 3 famous people that die in a row, and then it goes away for a while. We can remember 7-digit numbers, versus if you've ever been to a foreign country and they have a 6-digit number, it's a little harder to remember. Okay? In fact, I can prove my point. There's a famous song that says 8-6. Yeah, 8675, right? See, it's easy to remember, even though it's nobody's number that you know. When things are addressed in primes, they're easier to read. And look at the primes of the 3 characters here. Look at the 3 buildings there. There's almost 3 different pillars of rock going back as well. The whole composition is set up in primes. Okay? I don't know whose this was, but I found it and thought it was pretty cool. I think that might be Sparf again. It looks like he has some of these roughs that he does that are really fantastic. There's a little bit of detail in one area he wants you to look, and then everything else is just shape and suggestive detail and real rough painting. You know, and it's not just Sparf that's invented part of this. I mean, he's a really talented artist, and I have his books. I love his work, but I mean, I go back. I remember when I was 18, before Sparf existed, sitting in Marshall Vandriff's composition class, and we're studying, you know, N.C. Wyeth, and we're studying Howard Pyle, and we're studying Maxfield Parrish, J.C. Leyendecker. We're looking at how they composed pictures and how they told stories. We're looking at Drew Struzan and how he did his movie posters. So you're talking about artists that evolving over time, and then other artists pick up things from them, and then they evolve that into their own style, right? There's nothing wrong with working like that. That's how we all get better. We're all influenced in a positive manner from everybody and everything around us. That's what part of our species does, and does well. You know, we learn from our parents, and then after our parents, when we get out of there, then we start learning from a mentor, and then from there you get a job, you learn from that mentor, and then eventually you sort of become the person who's becoming the mentor, and then you teach somebody else. And that's part of that overall progression. It's that cycle that involves itself in everything that you do. Okay? Love that piece by Seth Ingstrom. Talk about magic pixie dust, right? Look at that. That's when I get students who are like, I want to be a visual development artist. Well, go look at Seth Ingstrom's portfolio. If he can do that level of work, he can be a visual development artist. If not, shut up and go learn how to draw props and go do storyboard revisions, right? Go do layout drawings and earn your keep over time. Seth was a layout artist back in the day. He worked at DreamWorks. He worked his way up. Some of that stuff takes time. He didn't go to art school, jump out and go, I'm going to be a visual development artist, and walk into the position. It's really hard to do that. I was telling a student the other day, when does that tend to happen? I've seen it happen where a couple kids from like Art Center or Cal Arts get put on a production and they start doing visual development. It's because the honest truth of it is because they're going in and the producer's allowed to pay them union minimum wage, which is $900 a week, instead of paying an experienced visual development artist $2,500 or $3,000 a week. That's the truth. And then what happens after that? The student gets burned out, or they're so stressed out because they can't compete. They haven't been working in 10 years of production where you have to produce 8 drawings, you know, every 2 or 3 days, you know. They're not used to having that, you know, having to create 5 pieces of development art in a week and a half for a presentation. All that comes over time, and it's a buildup, right? Okay. Uh-oh. I already showed those. Anyway, I didn't mean to, for this reason I put these back in here again. I forgot why. I think I was talking about part of the composition in the original lecture that I gave, looking at how this went from not only 2-point, but also transfers back into a better composing standard as well. Okay. All right. So that's it. We're going to end there. We're at 38 minutes. Next lecture, we're going to talk about 3-point perspective, how we use it, why we use it, the importance of it. That'll be our next assignment after this. All right. Thanks for watching, guys.